Hey everyone, welcome back to the Bookworm. My name is Dimitri, and today we're talking about my top 10 favorite reads of 2022. Starting off the list with number 11, because I did the list incorrectly, is A Hologram for a King by Dave Eggers. Of the 5 or 6 books I've read by Eggers, this is my favorite piece of fiction that he's written, but my favorite book is still his memoir, his creative nonfiction piece, a heartbreaking work of staggering genius, which I felt was a lot more genius than all of his other books. However, I felt like A Hologram for a King read like a really good pop song. It was very accessible, and yet it still grappled with really big ideas that I found profound or at least interesting. He grapples with the question, what does it mean to live in a country that no longer makes things anymore? And or in other words, what does it mean to live in a country full of middlemen, people passing on someone else's product, something that someone else made to someone else? And how do we find salvation in that? How do we learn to make things again? So I found this book really, really great. Next on my list is number 10, Socialist Realism by Trisha Lowe. I picked this up in a bookstore in Northern California. It's a local Bay Area artist. Trisha Lowe is a poet, I think. But this is a creative nonfiction. It reads like an essay, but it's an extended essay on what does it mean to desire a world that you know can't exist. And to live in an area, the Bay Area of California, that feels like it's the shepherd of all these new things and ideals that you live in, but that area still falls short of all your hopes and dreams for the world. So grappling with how do you fight for something that you want to exist, knowing that it will never happen. And this book is dark, depressing, but also very real, and I found inspiring, oddly, as well. So check this book out if you haven't heard of it. This book surprised me. Not the most, maybe the second most. Number 1, I think, was my biggest surprise for the year. So, Socialist Realism by Trisha Lowe. Number 9 is Adults in the Room by Yannis Varoufakis. Yannis Varoufakis was the finance minister of Greece during the economic crisis. And he wrote this book about how Greece was in this debt spiral and how he fought to get Greece out of this debt spiral. And he's able to explain these pretty complex economic issues in layman's terms, and then also make you feel very smart for understanding it. So it doesn't dumb it down too much, but then makes you feel like you can teach it to someone else. And I found that really interesting. This was also something, while this was happening in 2008, I was super fascinated with everything that was happening in Greece. And going back to Greece this summer and reading this book while I was there, it was really cool to see how things have shifted. I remember being in the middle of these riots in Greece after they were passing all these austerity measures, and then just seeing how much Greece has changed in the short amount of years since those days. And Greece, is still on its road to recovery, but I was able to celebrate something, right? Not the end goal, but to celebrate some form of salvation. And I think this book is a little bit more skeptical than I am, but it was fun to read and have a deeper understanding of how Greece fought for what it deserves and getting at least part of that. Number 8 on my list is Ruth Ozeki's brand new novel, The Book of Form and Emptiness. This book I really, really enjoyed. Ruth Ozeki is a Zen Buddhist monk / author. Her book, A Tale for the Time Being, was one of my favorite books when I read that. And I recommend that book to anyone that is going to travel to Japan. Read that book on her trip or before going. It's a great introduction to the culture, and it's a really fun time warpy, magical realist kind of book. This book is about a kid, Benny O, who can talk to objects or can hear the voices of all the things that he owns. And it deals with mental health in, I think, a really interesting way. And I really enjoyed it for that reason. But it also is... That's my cat batting at the door. Mango. Okay, Mango. It's also about how the things you clutter your life with affect you, even if you don't think they're affecting you. So I had a really strong desire to downsize and get rid of things. This is loosely based off of Marie Kondo's book, The Magic of Tidiness, or something like that. And so I actually bought that book and started doing some Marie Kondo, which I wouldn't have picked up because that feels too gimmicky, but Ruth Ozeki made it sound more philosophical and deeper. So there's this pretension that I need to get rid of, but it worked on me, and now I'm getting rid of things. So this book was great. Next on my list, and I mess up the numbers again, I think. I have 2 number 6s. Anyways, I'll figure it out while I'm talking about this book. Number 7 on my list is Sabrina by Nick Drancino. Not sure how to pronounce his name. I actually read all of Nick Drancino's books that have come out, and those will fall in my honorable mention list, but this was by far my favorite. Sabrina is drawn in this it's a graphic novel. This cold color palette, and it's... I don't know. How do I explain it? Maybe I should have taken notes before. It really captures this feeling for what the internet feels like and what it does to our brains. And that was a topic I was very, very interested in this year. And how these echo chambers destroy nuance in our conversations. Partly that, how these echo chambers maybe cause us to believe in more of these conspiracy theories. And it's also about this, I don't want to use underbelly of violence, but how violence pervades our American culture, where it feels like it's always there, even if it's not in front of your eyes. So yeah, it's you can call it a murder mystery. It's not really that, but it does follow the disappearance of Sabrina and the people that were in her life and what happened to her. But it's definitely a lot more than that. I liked it. If you like Chris Weir, the author of Jimmy Corrigan and Building Stories, he's buddies with Nick Drancino, and I think Nick Drancino is the next step for the indie comics scene, and yeah, check him out for sure. Okay. I am going to call this one number 6.5, because I have 2 6s by accident. Number 6.5 is Salman Rushdie's Midnight's Children. This is my first Rushdie novel. I had wanted to read Satanic Verses for some time. After Rushdie's stabbing this past year, I felt like I had to read him. And for whatever reason, Satanic Verses did not call me this time. When I read Ayad Akhtar's Homeland Elegies last year, that was in my top 5 of last year, he writes about in his novel how he liked Rushdie's Midnight's Children but didn't love Satanic Verses. And so going off of his recommendation, that author's recommendation, I picked this book up. And it's a magical realist book. It captures the history of India and all of its splinterings and partitions, and this child that was born at midnight has these magical qualities that mirror what's happening in India. So he's born the midnight of India's Declaration of Independence, or when it became independent, and he's magically entwined with the history and narrative of that country. Just really an amazing piece of fiction. I wish I knew more history of about contemporary India before going into this book. Definitely learned a lot while reading it. I wouldn't say it's a requirement, but I think having a general idea, maybe something beyond a general idea of modern Indian history would, I think, heighten this book. But yeah, check this out. Let me know if you liked Satanic Verses or anything else by Rushdie. I'm interested, but I'm not sold on reading another book by him. But I love this, so. Alright, the actual number 6 on this list is All About Love by Bell Hooks. This is my first Bell Hooks book. She passed away, I think, last year or 2 years ago. She is a theorist, a cultural critic, and this book talks about intersectionality. It talks about how love is taught in our culture and how the stories that we tell surrounding love matter. And it talks about how we love ourselves, how we love our partner, and it's all searching for finding a healthier way to talk about love in our society. And what I really liked about this book the most is how it talks about in every political movement there needs to be space for love. That so much of our politics today feel emboldened with hatred and vitriol, but actual change happens when love is in there, and loving those that you maybe think you should hate. I found that quite profound and interesting, and not maybe an answer a lot of people want to hear, but something that I think we all need to hear. So a pretty quick read. I actually was reading this as slow as I could, and after each chapter I journal a little bit and reflect, just so I can get a little bit more out of it. Each chapter is nice and tight and focused and covers so much at the same time. So Bell Hooks, definitely need to read some of her books about teaching, which will be next on this list. I don't have this book. I borrowed it from the library, but coming in at number 5 is My Favorite Thing is Monsters, Part 1. Part 2 has not come out yet. This is a graphic novel. It's kaleidoscopic in its imagery. It's drawn with this color pencil kind of texturing, with really fine lines. I think the art is just one of the best. Like, I love Nick Drancino, but it's pretty cold and maybe not as obvious why it's geniusly drawn. I think My Favorite Thing is Monsters is awe-striking to look at on each page, and you can see the detail and the time that the artist put on in each panel. That is a murder mystery, but it's told through the lens of a child that draws herself as a monster, and it's really hard to explain. I'm looking forward to part 2. That cliffhanger at the end. I would say it stands alone as part 1. You can just read part 1, but once part 2 comes out, I'm sure we'll be blown away. Which that's been delayed again and again and again. So hoping that comes out soon. All right, number 4 on my list is Stay True. Stay True came out this past year. It's written by this New Yorker author. It's really fantastic. It's a true story, creative nonfiction, about the author and a friend of his that he met while going to school at UC Berkeley. And so there's a lot of Bay Area references here, which I loved, sure. But later on in the novel, and this is not a spoiler because I think everyone knows this going in, his friend is killed in Oakland during a carjacking. And this book explores finding yourself in that pivotal moment of leaving home to go to college and that early adulthood life, but also finding yourself through your tastes and through the art that you find along the way, specifically music, and how music can help and heal you through really dark and hard and trying times. And it's also a lesson about letting go of your pretense, thinking that you're better than people because you have better taste in art, is something that the author struggles with in his young adulthood. But then he meets this friend that loves Dave Matthews Band and a few other artists that the author does not love, but then he learns to love his friend and appreciate how people can have different tastes. I don't think I'm selling this book enough, but it reads so fast, and I would say if I were to choose how to write, if I wanted to write like a specific author, I feel like I would want to write like this. It's just really breezy. It interweaves theory and then story and then theory and then art, philosophy, and it's great. That's all I can say. All right. Coming in at number 3, I have this at school because I'm reading 1984 with my students. It's a dystopian text. I made a video on this. It's The Memory Police. Memory Police is just a fantastic book. And instead of, like in 1984, in George Orwell's 1984, that dystopia is set in a world that destroys information. Memory Police does that kind of, but it doesn't physically destroy it. It mentally makes things disappear. And so you might be able to use the same words, but the emotions behind those words are erased. And so if you say the word love, or you say the name of a person that used to exist, if the government decides to get rid of that person or that thing, you no longer have the past or the memories or the emotions connected to it. It's really a trip. I go in a bit deeper in my 30-minute video on it, but I had so much fun with that. Number 2, I did not make a video for, but I really loved Henry Miller's Tropic of Capricorn. I made a video on Henry Miller's Tropic of Cancer, and I thought I did a pretty good job on that video. But some people, I think, by reading the comments, misinterpreted, thinking that I very much disliked that novel, which is not the case. But whatever the case, Henry Miller's Tropic of Capricorn is so much better. He wrote a book in between this, I think Black Spring, and then wrote this book. And this, you can just see the development of the artist in those years. He's not just writing about sex for sex's sake. He is just as terrible of a man as he is in Tropic of Cancer. But it feels like it has more of a point here. And there's less lag time between those genius moments that I felt like there was that lag time in Tropic of Cancer. So if you've never read Henry Miller, you're supposed to read Tropic of Cancer first. I would actually start here. This is so much better and breezier and just incredibly stimulating. So yeah, I loved it. And number 1's coming up, my honorable mention list. My year of rest and relaxation was fun. It felt like Fight Club meets the Bell Jar, which is maybe a weird way to describe a book, but that's how I'm going to describe it. Funny, breezy, easy to get through, but not quite great enough to make my top, I guess, 12 list. I really enjoyed reading Peter Singer's Animal Liberation. It was just interesting to see the philosophy behind the animal rights movement, and something that I maybe didn't expect to take as seriously, but it profoundly changed the way I look at my food and I look at culture, etc. Iain reads I'm Thinking of Ending Things. Netflix made a movie on this. I like the movie a little bit better, but this is still a really fun psychological thriller. What a twist. And it's a little bit more comprehensible than the movie, which is odd. But the ending makes more sense here. I've never read Octavia Butler, but she makes my honorable mentions list. Parable of the Sower. This is great sci-fi. I found this to be a really thrilling book and exciting and action-heavy. I'm just not someone that loves action-heavy type books, but her philosophy and morality that she builds in here is intensely fascinating. So really love that. Kind of the same line, Andy Weir, Project Hail Mary. This was a really fun science fiction novel. Tons of really amazing world building. Really brings you into the novel and into the world that he builds. Tons of action, but I just don't. I don't know. Reading 500 pages of, and then this exciting thing happened, and then that exciting thing happened. Maybe isn't for me. I don't know. I mean, I still read it and I still enjoyed it, so there's that. I read Stardust by Frank Bidart. Frank Bidart is a poet. I don't know how to properly introduce him, but Metaphysical Dog was my opening to him. I love that collection of poems, and I'm trying to read maybe one collection by him a year. So I read Stardust in this collection of all the poetry collections that he's ever written. So that was great. And then last in honorable mentions is the other Nick Drancino books. Beverly is his first book. Then he wrote Sabrina, which I already talked about. And then this book came out this year. It's called Acting Class. And it's his most psychedelic book that he's come out with. And covers a lot of the same topics and themes that exist in his other novels. But yeah, I definitely loved it. I just loved Sabrina more, and the story of Sabrina stays with me a little bit more. The ending is a little inconclusive, which is great, and it works thematically in Acting Class. Yeah, that's it. And number one on my list is No One Is Talking About This by Patricia Lockwood. This is the best book I read this past year. It also came out, I think, in 2021, so it's a fresh book. No other book has captured the feeling of being online better than this novel has. Yes, I said Sabrina tackles that. I read this first, and I thought this was the best book about online culture, but I was wrong. This one is. It is, I thought, fiction. I think it's categorized as fiction, but there's a lot more that is true here than I thought. When I read this, I thought this was a dystopic novel. I didn't read any reviews on it other than knowing that it was a Man Booker Prize winner, or shortlisted for the Booker Prize. And yeah, it is written by someone that lives their life very much online. And that's what the first half of the book is about, and then an event happens that pulls them out of the online world, and it's a contrast between living online and living offline, and what is real and what is worth not being online for. Yeah, it was fantastic. I absolutely loved this book. And that's it. I'm going to add one more thing, an honorable dismention. For whatever reason, I picked up J.G. Ballard's Crash, which is about people that survive car accidents and then have this sexual fetish about car accidents and love watching car accident films, and they recreate car accidents while having sexual acts. And I actually found this interesting and intriguing at first, and then it became really repetitive, and the way he describes the car accidents and the sex is really repetitive and monotonous after a while. So this was maybe my least favorite book, but I did like the idea of how it tackles in our culture our individualism, which I think is represented through car culture, and violence, and our celebrity worship, and there was a lot of really interesting topics wrapped up in here, but I still didn't like it. Anyways, that's it. That's my list for the year. We did it. Another year down. Have a good day. Bye.